Hello, everybody. Welcome to First Fridays with Fiona. Give me 1 second. I'm just going to go live on Instagram as well. Hopefully this will work. I do this every time, trying to make sure that I can simultaneously broadcast. Let me see to make sure. Bear with me. Hope everybody's doing okay. It's been it's been a short week with the holiday here. I know that some people are, depending on where you are, there's some holidays as well overseas. So let me see if this is going to work here. I don't know that I can get the Instagram to work, but anyway, here we go. Okay, checking connection. So, okay, great, live on Instagram as well. Hi, everybody. Hi, everyone who's watching on just the various platforms, of which there are so many. LinkedIn, multiple Facebook pages, I think also perhaps through YouTube and also through Twitter, I think through Periscope. So welcome, everybody. This is First Fridays with Fiona. Hi to everyone who's jumping on Instagram. Good afternoon from really sunny Chicago. So nice to feel like we're almost into summer. So yeah, it's hard to believe it's another First Fridays. We started this in January, now we're into June, and we've been doing them periodically, like every month. But then we've also been doing ones in between when things have come up. And Alex from our firm has also an immigration attorney here. Alex George did one last week. Ray has also done one, another attorney here who happens to be my brother. So anyway, you're all very welcome. I put up the question button through Instagram and I got some great questions. So I'm going to just jump straight in. But I guess the biggest question, or the biggest topic and the questions that we always have been getting, are surrounding the travel ban. And unfortunately, the regional travel ban is still in place. So that's the one that was put into place in March of last year. That's still there. I would say the vast majority of questions that we get on a daily basis or through the various social media platforms are relating specifically to these travel bans. It's the one that's, for people who've been in Ireland, the UK, Schengen, Brazil, China, South Africa, and India was added to the travel ban list. So that's still the same in relation to the fact that, like, insofar as it's still there. There were a few different potential exceptions to the travel ban, depending on your relationship, or whether it's a student visa, or potentially there's you may or may not be subject to it. I mean, a lot of people who are trying to come in, let's say to see adult children, is a question that we get. Grandparents trying to come in to see kids, unless they're falling into one of those narrow exceptions, they're most likely going to still be subject to that travel ban. But I would just check and see whether or not, first off, whether you're subject to it. Then whether or not there might be an automatic waiver for your classification, like students or something like that. That's a possibility. So, perhaps look into that. Thanks everybody for joining on Instagram. It's good to see you all chatting about the travel ban, and of course everyone here on Facebook and stuff like that. And yeah, these travel bans, I know that there were some reports back in I think it was like late April or May. And I know I've said this before, but I think it was just quite irresponsible reporting, because they were saying that there was like unconfirmed reports that they were going from the White House that these bans were going to be lifted in May. And obviously that didn't happen. I hate to see people getting their hopes up, because I know how personal and how much these mean to people, in terms of like wanting to be able to see your family and wanting to be able to travel home. I can feel the pain of the separation of these bans. And so I don't think it's fair to talk about stuff that may or may not happen in a kind of unconfirmed reports way. It's just really disappointing for people when it didn't happen. And we're just very reluctant to say anything about what may or may not happen until it actually happens. So we have not heard of anything happening or not. I am the chair of the Media and Advocacy Committee for AILA, which is the American Immigration Lawyers Association. So that's the bar association with over 15,000 immigration lawyer members. And, we're very active, obviously, in relation to, media, advocacy, outreach, all those sorts of things. And we have monthly meetings, regular listservs, all stuff like that. So we very much have our finger on the pulse. We haven't heard of anything. It's not to say that it couldn't happen. Of course it could happen, and we'd be delighted if it did, if the bans were revised. They were supposed to be revised. The Biden administration had mentioned back in January, when they were putting the bans back into place, that they would be modified, reviewed. They would be essentially reviewed every 30 days to see whether they needed to be continued or not. And that has not happened, insofar as they've added more countries to the list, but the ones that are there, there have been no changes to any of those based on, let's say, low COVID rates in Ireland or the UK and the high vaccination rates there. So unfortunately, the status quo is as it was, with just the minor kind of updates of there have been a few potential exceptions to this. And so if you're subject to the ban, you really need to kind of think, first off, you need to think, what type of visa do you have that you're trying to come in on? Are you trying to come in on ESTA? Do you have a visa stamp? There's a lot of considerations around travel when you're trying to figure out if you can enter the US. So there's just so many kind of things that would go on in my head when I'm trying to advise somebody about travel. It's very complicated. Anyway, it is complicated, but add in a pandemic, embassy closures, travel bans, and it's just a recipe for complication, and for you need specific advice for your situation. Today I'm happy to just, I've taken some questions that I'll jump in on, but this is not legal advice for your situation. Like your situation deserves individualized attention, especially like someone got in touch with us. They're going to go to somewhere, like Mexico or somewhere else for 2 weeks to quarantine and then maybe come in. I mean, if that's you and you're in that spot, like I would just urge you to, before you kind of undertake that expense, do yourself a favor and get a consultation with somebody who is familiar with these. Because to me, it just doesn't make sense to book a flight, to do all this, the hotel, to not have consulted with an attorney who's dealing with these. You really need to do that. And so hopefully people are able to, whether it's us or, or anybody who is an immigration attorney who is experienced with dealing with these travel bans. And we've been working on them for the past, 15 plus months or so. Okay, so somebody is saying, I'm just going to jump into these questions. Hopefully these are helpful to people. Again, not specific legal advice, more just general info, but hopefully there will be some tips. Somebody saying, any updates on the travel ban back into the US for L visa holders? Not like blanketly. It would depend on whether you would be eligible for an NIE, for one of the national interest waivers. Depends on what you're doing, where you are. There's different procedures depending on where you are, what embassy you need to apply through. So that would be relevant as well. And it's like, what's your role in the company? Why do you need to be physically back in the US? Would there be an argument to make a national interest case for you? What's the industry? What's your role? Those types of things would be relevant to assessing whether or not you'd be a good candidate for potentially a waiver. But you'd have to just probably review that with the attorney for your case, or get in touch with another attorney for like an independent consultation. Okay, someone's saying that they saw online that the US Embassy has cancelled further appointments indefinitely. Is this worrying? So I guess it would depend what embassy you're talking about. One thing that happened this week that was kind of threw us all for a bit of a loop was the embassy in London has actually cancelled the existing booked appointments. So people had appointments for the next few months. They had them starting July, August, September. Clients of ours that booked these appointments back in January. They got an appointment date in September for a particular visa interview. And then out of nowhere, the embassy in London cancelled everything earlier this week. And so, it was pretty chaotic amongst us immigration attorneys, like emails all through the listservs trying to figure out what was going on. Our bar association and the liaisons, who do such an incredible job, they got some information from the embassy, and the embassy said that apparently those appointments were placeholders, and they were just put there to allow people to make an appointment, and that they haven't ramped up to the level that would enable them to actually accept those appointments. So they were cancelling them. And the next available appointment is, I believe, March of 2022, which just sounds, really crazy. March of 2022, and you can potentially request an expedite. So, we're still trying to figure out what all this means. Somebody had asked whether you can book an appointment in another embassy outside of your home country, and I would just say it depends. So there are certain countries that are accepting what we would call third country nationals. So this changes also it can change by the week. So it just really depends on what the status quo is of that particular embassy, whether, and then you also need to think about the entry requirements into that third country. Like, we've had clients go to countries where they are being required to hotel quarantine for a period of time, and they're happy to do that. Notwithstanding the expense, they could get an appointment and they can do that because, that's what they want to do. It's obviously not an option for everybody. And if you're going to try to get an appointment in another country that is also subject to one of these travel bans, like some of the countries in Europe, you will need to be making a national interest exception case as well. So, definitely need some advice about whether or not that would be an option for you. Okay, someone's asking, why are some countries in Europe allowing appointments and some aren't? All covered by the travel ban, but some places you can get an interview. Spain and Austria. Yeah, that's a good question. And it's a good question because we don't know really why there is no uniformity with regards to some of this. For instance, somebody actually said today that they had a client with an appointment in Spain and Madrid that was cancelled abruptly as well for them. So I'm not sure what's happening there, whether there's more cancellations that will be forthcoming or not. But some posts, so some embassies and consulates are allowing you to renew your visa by mail if you meet certain conditions. So they're waiving the interview requirements. So you're not going to be required to go in for an interview. But this is kind of an option that really needs to be assessed on a case-by-case basis. Like, what's your visa type? Where did you get your previous visa? Do you meet the requirements for interview waiver in that particular jurisdiction? Normally it's the visa stamp needs to have been issued the previous stamp in that jurisdiction, so by the same post and in the same category. So you're essentially trying to renew the same category of visa in the same place. And there's a whole bunch of other kind of prerequisites that you need to meet in order to get one of those renewal via mail. So, and like I said, this is not being applied uniformly. Some posts are doing this more liberally with various categories. Some are limiting it to a few categories. But I would say if there's somebody who has a visa stamp and is trying to get a new one in the same category, we definitely look into whether or not that could be something that you would be able to get. Let me just pull through, and I'm just going to see if there's any other questions coming in. Just keep in mind, though, that anybody who asks questions live, your questions are coming up. So don't put anything confidential in the chat. Obviously, people can see it and your name's attached to it and everything. So, and again, not legal advice, just general info. So that's one thing to, kind of just think about the potential for getting a visa renewal via mail, and therefore not having to go in for an interview. And why that's important is that there's such huge backlogs for interviews for various visas. On the positive side, I guess maybe just some information is that there has been clarification on a priority for green card interviews, in terms of like when they have been doing some green card interviews, and immediate relatives of US citizens are getting kind of priority, along with cases that are very time sensitive, that are aging out, like where there's a child that's kind of turning 21, or where there's some kind of circumstance like that. So there's certain priorities for review in terms of those green card interviews. But it's been very frustrating for all of us involved in this. Okay, someone's asking, if you're offered a position in the US but you need visa sponsorship, is that something that will take years of I mean, the first thing you need to figure out, so someone's asking if they have a company that wants to sponsor them, what would the visa process look like? And that's very much an individualized analysis that you'd need. You don't know anything about your background, about the job, about the potential employer. We'd first need to see what type of visa you could get, and that would be the case kind of even beyond the pandemic, or outside of a pandemic. You need to assess that to see what is your position, who's the employer. There's loads of different types or I guess a few different visas that may work for you. Some people have one or two options, some people might have more, some people don't have any. So it just really depends on what the situation is. So someone's saying, is it possible to get a new visa process, not a renewal, if you're willing to spend 14 days in a non-travel ban country? So that is the issue, is that the embassy in London had said that they can issue initial visas for very few categories via mail. So it's really diplomatic categories like NATO visas, or like diplomatic A2, G, A1, which they're all the kind of governmental entity, where you're coming in an official capacity. They'd said that they could process some of those potentially through mail. The other option to renew via mail for more general categories is limited to specific visa types and renewals. So this depends on, I haven't seen anywhere, and there's so many posts all around the world, so I don't claim to know every single thing about every post, but I haven't seen where they're issuing initial visas through the mail, except for those categories that I mentioned, those diplomatic categories. But again, general info, you'd need to really kind of assess your situation depending on where you're going. Is there any guidance in relation to that particular embassy or not? And it's kind of hard for people to understand that you would imagine that some of this, or a lot of this, would actually be uniform, right? You would assume that the Department of State would have like uniform procedures, and there are not uniform procedures. So there are different types of procedures for different places. Okay, so let me see more questions here. Late to the live, no worries, welcome. COVID travel ban for non-US citizens, the status quo is the same unless you're exempt, unfortunately, unless there's either just doesn't apply to you based on various circumstances, but there's no kind of update to like the main travel ban that I know people have been asking for. So have I heard of people going to Mexico? I don't think there's been chatter on our listserv about this as well. Mexico, I think, has stated that they're not accepting third country nationals, but again, subject to maybe change or maybe some type of like emergency, but I think, as far as I'm aware, that they're not accepting third country nationals, so non-citizens or residents of Mexico. Someone's waiting for an interview for an E2 visa in London. I know it's terrible. I would say work with your attorney and see. There was some talk about E2s in London as well. So talk to your attorney and see if there's anything they can do in relation to that. Any update on when Irish people will be able to travel to the US on ESTA? Understand that they're blocked because of the COVID proclamation. Okay, so I think it's important to note that it's actually not, so it's not a nationality based proclamation. So what that means is it's not because you're Irish, it's not like all Irish citizens on ESTA can't come in. It's in relation to where have you been in the 2 weeks prior to wanting to enter the US. So it's a regional based travel ban based on, let's say in this case, being in Ireland for 2 weeks. So, I mean, there are people who go out of Ireland or one of the travel ban countries for maybe 2 weeks and then try to enter on ESTA that way. But again, if this is something that you're considering or this is a plan that you're thinking about, I just, given what's involved in this, like, you need to get some advice in relation to your situation to see whether this would work for you. I just, doesn't make any sense to me to go to all this expense with flights, hotels, everything, without even getting it like a consultation with somebody. So it's not based on being Irish though. It's based on where you've been in the previous few years. Someone's asking about, if you've lost your green card, can you travel with the receipt notice? I mean, look, that's a question that I would want to talk to you individually about to see. I would never, through this forum, advise somebody to leave the US in the current circumstances without having very specific info. And from your point of view as well, you do not want to be getting casual info and relying on something like that. Like, you know, we've just seen a lot of traumatic kind of separations because of the pandemic. And given that, I am so reluctant to advise anybody to leave the US unless they have been given a specific consultation, either from your attorney or for somebody else. Okay, somebody's saying there's a backlog at the Montreal embassy for, yeah, I mean, there's backlogs at every embassy, and a lot of countries don't accept other immigrant visas from other countries, so it's very hard to change once you've already selected that on your case. And so that might not be a possibility for you, and unfortunately this is the situation. There's huge backlogs. However, in terms of the priorities of order, the immediate relatives of US citizens are going to be looked at first when it comes to scheduling those appointments. And we have had some be scheduled, and we have had people get issued immigrant visas and come in on them. So, but I just think trying to switch in the middle of the process, chat to your lawyer, but it might not be feasible for you. Okay, thanks everybody for jumping on. These are some great questions. So let me see. Our embassy still processing work visas. This is the frustrating thing. There's some lawsuits as well in relation to this. I know my friends, Chuck Cook and Greg Siskind and Jeff Joseph, they're like the litigation team that have been taking all these class action lawsuits. And our bar association, AILA, have sued because they're saying it's, an entry ban versus a visa issuance ban. And so that's kind of the argument, is like, why not issue the visa and let somebody quarantine in for 14 days in a non-travel ban country? So that's kind of an ongoing issue. But the problem is trying to get the appointment scheduled. It's very difficult to get that. But I mean, I think there may be some lawsuits going on that people can join, if that's something that people are interested in. It could be something to look at, some of these class action lawsuits in relation to that. So someone's saying, do you need an NIE to get a new visa process? It depends on what visa you want. Where are you? What's your visa type? Certain visas are given automatic NIEs, like students. So it just really depends on what your situation is. Let me see, what are my other questions? Okay, so any changes you've seen recently in O1s getting approved? No, we haven't really seen any changes. We've been getting O1s approved. We got an EB1 extraordinary ability green card petition approved there last week without a request for evidence, which was amazing. It was a lot of hard work, and we were delighted with that. So no, haven't seen anything in relation to that. So more questions here about, do we know when the embassy is opening up? We don't. I mean, like I said, we have had some visa interviews, very few, but we have had some visa interviews. Someone's asking, can I explain the O1 and the EB1? Okay, so the O1 is the extraordinary ability visa, and we actually do a lot of these for people in various industries. And I speak to other immigration attorneys at our national conference on these. I've hosted many panels on the O1 extraordinary ability visa. Our office is in like music entertainment space. We do a lot of work in the startup and tech community. And so we do a lot of O1s for just all various fields. Really fun, really interesting, creative cases. And so I did a full webinar on this that I think is available on our YouTube channel, if anybody is interested in watching it, where I go through kind of the main parts of the O1, what's involved in it, and things like that. And then the EB1A, EB1 is employment based, so that's what the EB stands for. It's the green card version of the O1. and it's the extraordinary ability green card. So you might have heard about, Melania Trump getting the Einstein visa or the Einstein green card. That's what the EB1A is, the extraordinary ability green card. And there's a higher standard. It's similar in terms of some of the requirements are similar to the O1. There's kind of a mirroring sometimes of requirements, but the standard's higher. But there's some great benefits to the EB1A. It's obviously at the end, if it gets approved and everything, it's permanent residency. It's a green card. You can also self-petition completely. You do need to show that you have work lined up in your field, but you can self-petition. And I think we're seeing now really the value of having a green card, probably more so than ever, in terms of, permanent residents are not subject to these travel bans, and, just have more flexibility in terms of, there's been some changes to people's employment situations with COVID, and, O1s might require amendments and so on and so forth. If there are material changes to the terms of the O1. So just something to think about, the O1 and the EB1. Sometimes people like to test the waters with like their extraordinary ability, or we might recommend as a strategy to do the O1 first, and just to see, how the O1 case goes. And it's by no means a guarantee if you get your O1 approved that you're going to get the EB1, the green card version, approved. But it's a nice can be a nice stepping stone from one to the other. So welcome everybody who's joining us. Hi on Instagram and hi online on the various platforms. So yeah, I think, look, the majority of questions that we're getting relating to travel bans, embassy appointments, all sorts. I know somebody during the week when I posted up my story said they get so excited, hoping that it's an update on the travel ban, and I so wish that I was able to give you guys that update too. Oh, I'm gonna get teary-eyed because these bans are so just upsetting, and I think that at a certain point they just don't make sense anymore, with vaccines, with testing, with other countries having higher rates than kind of some of the banned countries, and that the fact that the bans were put in place last March and really have not been reviewed ever since. I know it's very upsetting to people with the lack of availability of appointments at embassies. We're all sympathetic to consular officers and to the Department of State, like we absolutely are. We know that they have a very tough job, and that that I'm sure a lot of them are trying their best, and being frustrated by various systems and stuff. So we really do understand and appreciate that. However, there's been huge devastation caused by these separations, and I think a lot of us have had to adjust to doing our jobs in a way that we maybe didn't want to or didn't anticipate before, whether it's Zoom. Our kids were on Zoom school for a year, so we've all made sacrifices and changes and modifications, and I think that we're hoping that the Department of State is able to also get on board with that, because having the next available appointment in London be March of 2022 is not acceptable. And it's bad for families, for reunification, for people with families being separated. Like, someone's asking about K1s. Can they go for a K1? I think you should talk to your attorney if you're working with one about K1s. There was some more litigation. There's been issues with the National Visa Centre and K1s. But it's hard to go to a third country for those family-based processes. If they've started at one, it can be difficult to switch. Not impossible, but it can, it may be possible. But it's bad for business. It's bad for families. We all want to get back to some type of feasible timeline, and not see you in 12 months time when you want to set up a business and grow jobs in the US. So I'm hoping that we can all work together to see whether we could think about some of these interview waivers? Maybe could we expand them to not limit them to certain categories? Or, if some embassies can process them for other categories, why are other embassies only picking a couple of categories? So having like a common sense approach to how can we get back to some type of normality with visa processing and visa issuance and things like that. And processing time. Someone was asking a few questions about the USCIS processing time. Someone was saying waiting 15 months for a green card with no update since their biometrics. Like, that's somebody who's done everything right. They followed all the right steps, and they've done, and not that there's, a hierarchy of like, but 15 months to have nothing in between getting biometrics taken. I mean, that's not acceptable. Like, we're all trying to do our best. There was also a law that was passed that would allow to premium process certain things. And we haven't seen the implementation of that as well, where some people who are privileged enough to be able to afford to pay to premium process that certain applications, which they would do when people are out of work waiting for their work permits to get renewed. So anyway, that's just some of the things that we're seeing on the ground, and why it's been so hard for everybody over the past 15 months. It's been just really hard for us to advise clients every day when we don't know the timelines, when there's not really, the information's not forthcoming, when things are changing mid game, when someone has an appointment and all of a sudden it's cancelled and the next appointment is March of 2022. I mean, that's a very hard, it's a hard thing to explain, because that just seems really crazy. But anyway, just know that we're all trying our best here. There's I think just such an amazing group of just incredible immigration lawyers that make me so proud to be a member of this profession. And every day we're collaborating, we're helping each other out. Someone emailed me about, an interview waiver in London and a thing in Dublin, and I emailed somebody. I mean, we're all cooperating with each other, collaborating. It's just a kind of a beautiful association to be part of, and to just know that we are there supporting each other, which in turn helps us support all of you guys, our clients. Which is really what we want to do the most, is be here as a resource to support everybody. So I'm going to wrap up. Hopefully people got some info from that. I know it's hard. It's impossible for me to give you specific advice or to say to you in this type of forum, yeah, you can travel, no problem, or yes, you can switch your embassy. But hopefully, that's just obviously not the purpose of this, and it's just not, we just can't legally do that as well without seeing documents and knowing your situation and that type of thing. But I think, just I would urge people to, oh, you're welcome, Angela, thanks for saying that. Hopefully these are helpful to people. I'll continue to do them until you guys tell me not to. I'm hoping I'll have an update for you between now and next month. We have our big immigration lawyer conference next week. It's our annual ALA, the American Immigration Lawyers Association conference. It's normally in person. Obviously, it wasn't last year and is not this year, but it's our big conference. And I'm hosting a panel. Oh, thanks. I'm a legend. I love it. I can't remember if I was ever called that before, but I'm hosting a panel actually on the changes of the Biden administration's changes, what they've changed, what they've left. So that should be pretty interesting. I'll be preparing for that. Oh, you're so welcome. Yeah, so it's a pretty big deal, the panel that I'm hosting. I have amazing colleagues on it. I'm really honored to have that opportunity to lead the discussion. And Elaine saying that these are really helpful. Good. I'm glad you guys find them helpful. I think if anything, just to hear someone talk about, even if it's to say that there's no change, just to know that we're here advocating for you, hopefully makes people, maybe feel a little bit better. But anyway, so tomorrow or next week we have our big conference. There's going to be some representatives from the various government agencies there, and we will be Secretary Mayorkas is going to be there giving the keynote address. And so hopefully I'll have some news to share with you all over the coming weeks. I'm going to be pretty tied up for the majority of next week, given that I'm speaking on the panel and then speaking on another panel at the global conference. So So yeah, one final question. Okay, the difference between the older existing business visa and the new international entrepreneur visa. So there's no like general business visa. It depends on what visa. There's the H-1B, which is a professional kind of specialty occupation visa. There's the E-2, which is the investor visa if you're investing your own funds personally. The international entrepreneurial is something that I am so excited about. It's like the startup visa, although it's not a visa. It's super exciting. I'm going to be mentioning it in my panel. I am like in love with this option. I have spoken about it. I have written about it. I have advocated, lobbied, done all sorts for it for the past, I'd say, at least 6-7 years or so. And so this is a new option that is it's a long history of it. It kind of supposed to take effect at the start of the Trump administration. It was like an Obama Biden thing, and then they blocked it, and then oh, you're excited too. Yeah, I'm super excited about it. So it's the USCIS did a teleconference on it, and there was a few details that they didn't really know yet because it's brand new, and I asked them some questions that they just weren't sure about, processing times and things like that. But oh, you have a startup ready to go. Great. Okay, so the startup needs to have been created in the US in the previous 5 years. You need to have a significant ownership interest in the startup. The main thing is that we need to show that the startup has the potential to create jobs and make a positive impact on the economy. And there's kind of two ways that they're saying we show this, is that you've already received funding, around 250,000 from accredited investors. So you think like angel investors, venture capital funds, startup accelerators, things like that. The investment of in and around 250,000, or alternatively 100,000 from government grants, local, federal, state type grants. But there's also potential to maybe have a combination of both of those. So if you don't have either the 250 or the 100, if you've raised some funds and you have some other compelling things to show, there may be a potential for you to get that. There's a lot of unknown still. Like I said, processing times unclear. There's discussion about people needing a specific boarding foil to leave and then re-enter, and so we're still trying to figure out from the USCIS what that means. I'll definitely be following up with them on that. They have a webinar in 2 weeks on that. Like, this is my baby. I feel like I have nurtured this along with lots of advocates in this space as well. So the National Venture Capital Association have been doing amazing work. I myself, with the Illinois Science and Technology Coalition, wrote an op-ed on this. I did some stuff that was featured in the Chicago Sun-Times. So there's just we've been trying really hard to get a lot of energy around this. And so I'm super excited. So if anybody wants info on that, feel free to DM me. Also, you can get in touch with our firm at info@mcenteelaw.com if anyone wants to arrange a consultation. And yeah, just keep in touch, follow us. Great, you're welcome. Looking forward to speaking to you too. This is literally, like, I'm so excited about the startup entrepreneur option, and I'm hoping that I've lobbied on Congress on this in particular, and I'm hoping that this is the start, with the more permanent option being an actual startup visa that Congress can pass that would have a path to permanent residency and other things. So I'm hoping this is the start of the US immigration system just becoming a bit more modern, right? We haven't had a new option in like 20 plus, 30 years or so, which is crazy when you think of all the things that have happened with technology, the internet, like all that kind of stuff. Like, we need an option for startup entrepreneurs. We do not have one. We're at a huge competitive disadvantage because we do not have one. And, it's about time we're able to accommodate these, because it's good for America. It's great for the economy, business, job creation. I mean, you name it. It's a win-win-win as far as I'm concerned. And I have so many clients that I know will benefit from this. So I look forward to helping people with this. It's like a huge passion of mine. And yeah, so sign of hopefully more positive things to come. In the meantime, stay tuned, follow us here on wherever you're watching. We'll be trying to post regular updates. I'm also doing a webinar through the Irish Consulate. It's through Irish Community Services here in Chicago, which is an amazing nonprofit that we run their pro bono immigration clinics periodically. I'm doing a webinar with Consul General here in Chicago and in Atlanta, I think, as well. So there's a few of us speaking on the panel about travel. That's July 1st. We just got the info on that. So I'll be sharing that all about, COVID testing, quarantining, both here and there. and kind of what that looks like. So I'll share the info. You guys can sign up for that. I presume it's like Zoom or one other kind of it's online anyway. So okay, hope everybody has a great weekend and gets some downtime and hopefully some fresh air. It's good for the body, the soul, the mind, everything. We need it to kind of tackle some, these issues. For those who are in Ireland, I don't know if the UK has one as well, but there's bank holiday this weekend. So hopefully you guys have a great bank holiday. I'll check in after our AILA conference next week and I will report back if there's anything that I learn. And that's it. Take care.